Mervyn traces the cracks on his son's climbing axe, the only thing recovered from the mountain 7 years ago. The official report called it a tragic fall, a story cemented by his son Caleb's climbing partner Julian, the sole survivor. But a call from a glaciologist changes everything. A yellow helmet, Caleb's helmet, has emerged from a melting ice fissure miles from the supposed accident site, in a location that suggests not a fall, but a desperate fight for survival. What you're about to hear is a father's relentless search for the truth, a journey into the freezing heart of a mountain, and an even colder betrayal. Stay with us as we uncover what really happened on that unforgiving peak. The ice axe leaned against the fireplace, a silent monument in Mervyn's quiet home. For 7 years, it had been the beginning and end of the story. Its polished steel head and worn wooden handle were the only tangible pieces of his son he had left. Everything else had been swallowed by Denali. Mervyn, now in his late 50s, had been a climber once. He had taught Caleb how to read a rock face, how to tie a figure-8 knot, how to respect the silent, deadly power of the mountains. He had seen the fire in his son's eyes, the same fire that once burned in his own. But his own fire had been extinguished on the day the park rangers called. They told him there had been an accident on the western buttress route. Caleb and his partner, Julian, were on the final ascent when a storm rolled in. Julian's account was heartbreakingly clear. He said Caleb had lost his footing on an icy patch, his rope snapping against a sharp rock as he fell into an inaccessible crevasse. Julian had barely made it down alive, battered by the storm and grief. He'd brought back Caleb's ice axe, which had been dislodged in the fall. The story was clean, tragic, and believable. It was accepted by the park service, the media, and everyone else. But a small, cold part of Mervyn's soul never accepted it. He knew the ropes they used. They were rated to hold thousands of pounds. For one, to snap on a sharp edge was possible, but unlucky in the extreme. Over the years, he watched as Julian's star rose. The tragic survivor became a hero. Julian wrote a best-selling book titled Solo at the Summit, detailing his harrowing survival and the loss of his brother on the mountain. He went on speaking tours, his handsome face filled with practiced grief as he spoke of Caleb's courage. He launched a high-end outdoor gear company, Ascend, using his story as the ultimate marketing tool. His wealth and fame grew, built on the foundation of his son's death. Mervyn watched it all from a distance, the quiet doubt in his heart festering into a bitter resentment he could never voice. Who was he to question the only witness? He lived with the ghosts, the photos of Caleb on the mantelpiece, the climbing magazines in the attic, the ice axe by the fire. He had accepted that this was his life now, a quiet existence haunted by a question he could never answer, until the phone rang. The voice on the other end was professional, academic. "Mr. Mervyn Vance? My name is Dr. Aris Thorne. I'm a glaciologist with the University of Alaska Fairbanks. We're conducting a glacial retreat survey on Denali." Mervyn's heart began a slow, heavy drumbeat against his ribs. "Yes?" "I know this may be difficult, sir," Dr. Thorne continued, his voice careful. "We were surveying a section of the Treleka Glacier on the east side of the mountain. It's an area that's seen significant melting in recent years. We found something that I believe may have belonged to your son, Caleb." Mervyn gripped the phone, his knuckles turning white. What did you find? A helmet. A yellow climbing helmet with a blue mountain sticker on the front. The name C. Vance is written on the inside. The air left Mervin's lungs. It was Caleb's. He had given him that sticker himself. "Where did you find it?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. Dr. Thorne paused. "That's the unusual part, Mr. Vance. It was in a meltwater fissure, near the base of the Wickersham Wall. Are you familiar with the area?" Mervin's mind, once a map of every route and face on that mountain, clicked into focus. The Wickersham Wall. A brutal, almost vertical, 14,000-foot wall of rock and ice. It was legendary for its difficulty and danger. It was also a world away from the Western Buttress, the popular route where Julian claimed the accident had happened. The two locations were on opposite sides of the massive mountain, separated by miles of treacherous, impassable terrain. A body or a piece of gear could not simply travel from one to the other, not by wind, not by avalanche, not by any act of God. "Mr. Vance, are you still there?" "Yes," Mervin said, his voice cold and steady. "I'm here. Can you give me the exact coordinates?" As the glaciologist read out the numbers, the doubt that had lived in Mervin's heart for 7 years finally ignited into a raging fire. Julian had lied. The whole story was a lie. And for the first time in a long, long time, Mervin had a purpose again. He was going back to Alaska. He was going to find out what really happened to his son. The flight to Anchorage was a blur. Mervin spent the hours staring out the window at the clouds. The coordinates from Dr. Thorne burned into his memory. From Anchorage, he rented a truck and made the familiar 2.5-hour drive north to Talkeetna, the small rustic town that served as the base camp for Denali climbers. It had changed little in 7 years. The same log cabin storefronts lined the main street, and the snow-dusted peaks of the Alaska Range loomed in the distance. He met Dr. Thorne at the Walter Harper Talkeetna Ranger Station. The glaciologist was a kind-faced man in his 40s, his brow furrowed with concern. He led Mervin to a back room where a plastic evidence box sat on a metal table. Inside was the helmet. It was unmistakably Caleb's. The vibrant yellow was faded and scarred, with deep scratches. The blue mountain sticker was peeling at the edges. Mervin lifted it from the box, his hands trembling slightly. He ran a finger over a particularly deep gouge near the temple. This wasn't the damage of a simple fall. This looked like a fight, like the helmet had been scraped against rock again and again. "The location is what's indefensible," Dr. Thorne said, unfolding a large topographic map. He pointed to a spot on the western buttress. "This is where the accident was reported. Standard route. Thousands of climbers have used it." Then his finger traced a long, impossible path across the map to the other side of the mountain. "And this," he said, tapping a point at the base of the Wickersham Wall, "is where we found the helmet." No climber would be there by choice, not on that route, Mervin said, more to himself than to the doctor. "It's a death trap." "Exactly," Dr. Thorne agreed. "For it to end up there, something is very wrong with the official story, Mr. Vance." Mervin's next stop was to see an old friend, Gene, a retired park ranger who had been on duty the year Caleb disappeared. He found him running a small fishing charter business out of a cabin by the Susitna River. Gene's face, weathered and kind, broke into a sad smile when he saw Mervin. "I heard they found something," Gene said, pouring 2 cups of coffee. "I knew you'd be here." Mervin explained everything, showing Jean the map with the two conflicting locations. Jean stared at it for a long moment, shaking his head. "I always had a bad feeling about that kid, Julian," he admitted. "His story was too polished, too perfect. He had an answer for everything, but we had nothing to go on. He was the only one who came back." "I need to talk to him," Mervyn said. "He's not the same broke kid you remember," Jean warned. "He's a big shot now, lives in a glass house up in the hills outside of Seattle, runs that company of his." "I know," Mervyn said grimly. "That's where I'm going next." Before he left Alaska, Mervyn did some digging. He went online and found the original press release for the sponsorship deal Caleb and Julian had signed before their Denali expedition. It was with a company called Vortex, an energy drink giant known for funding extreme sports. The contract was for a staggering sum, contingent on a successful two-man ascent of a new, difficult route they had planned. But Mervyn kept reading, digging into the fine print of similar contracts he found online. He discovered a common clause in these high-risk sponsorships, a bonus provision, a massive, life-changing bonus, often doubling the original prize if a climber was forced to complete a major ascent solo due to the injury or incapacitation of their partner. The motive, cold and clear, clicked into place. This wasn't just about fame. This was about millions of dollars. The headquarters of Ascend Gear was an architectural marvel of glass and steel, nestled in the lush forests outside Seattle. It looked more like a modern art museum than a corporate office. Mervyn, in his simple flannel shirt and worn jeans, felt out of place as he walked into the gleaming lobby. A stylish receptionist told him that Mr. Thorne was in a meeting and couldn't be disturbed. "Tell him Mervyn Vance is here," Mervyn said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Tell him it's about Caleb." Minutes later, he was escorted into a spacious corner office with a panoramic view of the forest. Julian stood to greet him, his hand outstretched. He was just as Mervyn remembered, handsome, charismatic, with a smile that could sell anything. He wore an expensive-looking sweater and tailored pants. "Mervyn," he said, his voice dripping with synthetic sympathy. "It's been too long. I'm so sorry we lost touch." Mervyn ignored the offered hand. "They found Caleb's helmet, Julian." The smile on Julian's face didn't falter, but something in his eyes flickered. "I heard. The Park Service called me. A terrible reminder of what we all lost. I hope it brings you some measure of peace." "It was found at the base of the Wickersham Wall," Mervyn said, watching Julian's face carefully. For the first time, a crack appeared in Julian's perfect facade. His smile tightened. He walked over to the window, turning his back to Mervyn. "The mountain is a strange place," he said dismissively. "Glaciers move. Avalanches carry things for miles. Who knows how it got there?" "You and I both know that's impossible, Julian," Mervyn said, his voice rising. "It's on the wrong side of the mountain. It's 15 miles away from where you said he fell. You were a geology major. You know, a glacier doesn't move something across a continental divide." Julian turned back, his expression hardening. The mask of the grieving friend was gone, replaced by something cold and hostile. "What are you implying, Mervyn?" "I'm implying your story is a lie. What really happened up there?" "What happened is what I've said happened for the last 7 years," Julian snapped. "Your son made a mistake. He fell. I almost died trying to save him. I've had to live with that trauma every single day. I built this company from nothing but pain and grief to honor his memory." "Did you honor his memory when you collected the solo ascent bonus from Vortex?" Mervyn asked quietly. The color drained from Julian's face. He was speechless. I read the contracts, Julian. A solo ascent doubles the payout. You walked away from that mountain a very rich man. Get out, Julian said, his voice a low hiss. Get out of my office. This isn't over, Mervyn said, backing toward the door. I'm going to find out the truth. As he walked out of the gleaming building, Mervyn knew he had his man. Julian's panicked reaction was as good as a confession, but suspicion wasn't proof. He needed something more. He needed to go back to the mountain, back to the spot where the helmet was found. The truth, he knew, was still up there, frozen in the ice. Mervyn knew he couldn't make the climb himself. His body wasn't what it used to be, and the terrain around the Wickersham Wall was for the young and the fearless. But Jean, his retired ranger friend, had connections. He made a call to the Alaska State Troopers, explaining the situation, the impossible location of the helmet, and Julian's suspicious reaction. He framed it as a need to officially investigate a discrepancy in an old report. The troopers were reluctant at first, but the evidence was strange enough that they agreed to authorize a reconnaissance mission. They sent a two-man team, a trooper and an experienced mountain guide, by helicopter to the coordinates provided by Dr. Thorne. Mervyn waited in Talkeetna, every hour stretching into an eternity. He sat in his small motel room, staring at the map, his mind playing out 100 different scenarios of what could have happened on that mountain. On the third day, the call came. "Mervyn, it's Trooper Davies," the voice on the other end said. "We found something. You need to come down to the station." When Mervyn arrived, the two men from the expedition were there, their faces grim. On the table, inside another evidence bag, was a 6-foot length of climbing rope. It was the same vibrant orange as the rope Caleb and Julian had used, but it was the end of the rope that made Mervyn's blood run cold. It wasn't frayed or broken, the fibers torn apart from the strain of a fall. It was cut. The end was perfectly clean, sliced through with a blade. We found it wedged in a rock crevice, about 50 yards from where the helmet was recovered, Trooper Davies explained. "Someone cut this rope, Mr. Vance." The final piece of the puzzle slammed into place. Mervyn could see it all now. Caleb, maybe injured, maybe just exhausted, hanging from the rope. Julian, above him, seeing his chance, not for fame, not for glory, but for money. A quick slice with a knife. A single, brutal act of betrayal. He had pushed Caleb's body into a deep crevasse on that remote side of the mountain, then traveled back around to the popular route to sell his story of a tragic accident, leaving the ice axe behind as false evidence. With the cut rope in hand, the Alaska State Troopers had enough to act. They flew to Seattle with a warrant. Mervyn went with them. He needed to see Julian's face when the lie finally crumbled. They found him not at his office, but at his waterfront mansion, preparing to host a lavish party. When he saw Mervyn standing with the troopers, his face went pale. "Julian Thorne," Trooper Davies said, his voice booming in the marble entryway. "You're under arrest for the murder of Caleb Vance." Julian tried to bluff, to feign outrage, but when they held up the bag with the severed rope, he broke. He collapsed into a chair, his handsome face crumbling as 7 years of lies came crashing down. The confession came tumbling out, a pathetic story of greed and opportunity. Caleb had taken a small fall and sprained his ankle. He couldn't continue the ascent. For Julian, in that moment, His partner was no longer a friend, but an obstacle standing between him and $2 million. So he cut the rope. Months later, Mervyn stood at a viewpoint near Talkeetna, looking out at the majestic, terrifying peak of Denali. Julian had been convicted, sentenced to life in prison. The company he built on a lie was in ruins. Justice had been served. Mervyn had cleared his son's name. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bronze plaque. It read, "Caleb Vance. He climbed with courage and a true heart, finally at peace." He wedged the plaque into the base of the memorial telescope, a small tribute to the son the mountain had taken and a liar had tried to erase. The grief was a permanent part of him now, like a shard of ice in his heart that would never fully melt. But the anger, the burning uncertainty, was gone. He could finally look at the mountain and remember his son not for how he died, but for how he had lived, with a passion for the high, quiet places, and a smile as bright as the Alaskan sun. If you were in Mervyn's position, could you ever find peace after such a profound betrayal? Or would the anger always remain? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If this story of a father's unwavering determination resonated with you, we invite you to support our channel by liking this video and subscribing for more narratives about the long road to the truth.